Hello there, pirates. Welcome back. This video is supposed to be an explainer about how to use ship defense in Battle Pirates, how the multiple layers and tactics you can apply to defend your ships in any battle, in any situation. So first of all, let's understand what damages your ships. So you can be damaged by direct hits, like the kind of hit you take from a cannon, or any weapon like a torpedo, most torpedoes that have accuracy. So if you see a weapon with accuracy, that means it's a direct hit. You don't see splash, you don't see spread, you don't see area of effect, you don't see anything like that. It's just a hit, right? The other way you can be damaged through splash or shockwave, and both count as like area of effect damage. So something like this turret, or any mortar or rocket for that matter, they will have a splash area from the point of impact, a spread zone, and in some cases they will have like a shockwave. It's always centered on your ship, but still has an area of effect, so any other ship stacked together will take the same damage. So that's an area of effect. If you have 5 ships in there, 5 ships take the damage. Direct hits, on the other hand, unless they have splash, they will only damage the one ship that was hit by the projectile. A third type, it's damage over time. Damage over time accumulates. So as a weapon hits you more and more and more and more over time, you keep getting damage. So for instance, the Cobra Scattergun's a limited weapon. It gives you 360 damage over time, but each hit stacks up to 2400 max damage over time, and each projectile that hits your ship will be doing damage for a period of 6 seconds. So as it keeps hitting, they keep accumulating, but each projectile fades in 6 seconds. Okay, so these are pretty much the 3 things or 3 ways your ship can be damaged. So now on the other hand, this is how you can defend your ships. So there are multiple layers, multiple ways and techniques you can defend your ships. You can use to defend them. And by the way, this is the order in which they apply. So first of all, when something's fired at your ship, can it be countermeasured? If it can, it will. Second is it going to hit your ship? If you have high evade and it's a direct hit kind of weapon, it may hit or may miss. If it misses, you take 0 damage. The third way is a new way, is the armor pull. Works like a shield and will shield you from all the damage except for a minimum damage that passes through the shield and hits you in full. We'll talk about each one of them in sequence in more detail. I'm just going through each one of them. In some cases, you can have splash damage reduction, armor or fields. So when something hits near your ship, nearby your ship, the splash zone, the splash radius is reduced in a way that your ship then takes less damage. Another way that actually depends a lot on your driving is speed. A lot of weapons have what's called dump fire, which means they will fire at the position your ship is the moment they fire at it. But if you keep moving, then it will miss if you move fast enough. And even if it has splash, you move fast enough, less of that splash will damage your ship. A great example are the Apollos fighting mega hulls. When those scattergun turrets fire at you, if you move, you don't take damage. Another great example, mortars. Mortars will fire at the position you are. You keep moving, they'll just miss you completely, right? Then after speed, there's resistance. So if countermeasures don't work, evade doesn't work, you don't have an armor pull, splash damage reduction is not enough to keep you out of the radius, and you cannot move, your speed isn't enough, or it's a smart fire weapon that will actually track your ship no matter how fast you move, like launchers and missiles are like that, then the resistance comes in place, and that can deduct a percentage from the damage you would take. So a missile hits you and it's going to do 1,000 damage. If you have 90% resistance, it's only going to do 100. After resistance, you can apply turret resistance. So if that missile coming at you that deals 1,000 damage comes from a turret, and you have 90% resistance, so only 100 gets through, you can still apply turret resistance if that's coming from a turret. In which case, let's say you have 50% turret resistance. So out of that 100 that was left, you take 50% off, only 50 will hit your ship. Okay? And after that, maybe you still have deflection. And deflection is a flat amount. So let's say you still now have 20 deflection against siege fire. Okay? And then from that 50, only 30 will hit you. And that's what's going to hit your armor. And armor is the actual damage you take that you have to repair after you dock the ship. So that's how it works in that order. Now let's talk about each one of them so you understand them better. So first of all, countermeasures. Here's a quick table to help you understand what counters what. So you see that things like cannons, depth charges, launchers, scatterguns, throwers, and torpedoes cannot be countered. Okay? So if you're going to fight against, let's say, a river armada that's only firing concussive at you, then there's no point in using any countermeasures. On the other hand, if you're doing Forsaken mission, where most of the fire you take are mortars and missiles, then you definitely should have a lot of countermeasures. And you can see what kills what. So flanks and switchblade will counter missiles and UAVs. Hailstorms, gales will counter mortars and UAVs. The Trident missile, it's a very finicky one, so be careful when using that one. But it's the only one that actually can counter rockets. The problem is it also counters missiles, and it's a lot less efficient than the flanks or switchblade at doing so. But it has longer range, so it might actually make you take more damage because it will be trying to counter missiles and with lower accuracy, and more of them will get through. Okay? And there's the brand new deep sea countermeasure that right now only fits the Gluttony, the new sub. That one actually counters missiles and mortars. Okay, so that's just an overview. I'm not going to go deep in each one of them because I want to keep the video within a short duration. So just an overview. These are the countermeasures. That's what can be countermeasured and what cannot. So up next we have evade. Evade is effective against any weapon that has an accuracy number. From 100% accurate, 50% accurate, 80% accurate. The evade can counter and make them miss your ship. Overall, cannons, missiles, torpedoes, launchers all have an accuracy value, so they are direct hit weapons. Some of them are smart fire, which means they will track your ship even if you move. Some are dumb fire, meaning they will shoot at where your ship is, and if you move, you can escape the hit. We'll talk more about that later when I discuss speed. There's many ways you can gain evade. One of them is through many specials, reflective coating, guidance scrambler, agility system, speed system, evade upgrade, thrusters. There is evade armor from D2E to D5E that you can use to increase evade. And every ship, every hull in their blueprint will have a base evade number. If you see a blueprint of a ship without a base evade number, it means the evade is 0. Okay, then it's not displayed. Some ships you'll see they have negative evade, and negative evade and 0 evade are the same. It's only there as a negative to make it harder for you to gain evade above 0. It's a trick Kixeye uses. So the math is very simple. Evade will never be over 100%, but as you add components that give you evade, in some cases you can get it up to 70%, 80%, which is very, very good. And the way it applies is, let's say a weapon has 100% accuracy, you have 0% evade on your ship, every weapon firing at your ship will hit. Okay? If the weapon has 80% accuracy and you have 70% evade, then the math you do is 80 times 70%, then you subtract that from the 80%, initial 80%, and it gets you down to 24% of every projectile fired at your ship will hit. Okay, so it's very... Okay, before we continue now, I need to make a quick pause and make sure you understand PvP versus PvE gameplay. So PvE is when you're playing the environment, anything you can hit that the game gives you. So salvages, river armadas, draconian strongholds in FM, mines, uranium bases, legion targets, that level 91 mega hull where you can get titanium from, raid targets, TLCs, time limited campaigns that use raid elements like the Odyssey we just had using elements from the Scourge raid. And these are usually hit by assault, siege, skirmish, garrison, and generalist ships. They were made for those, right? So some of the things we discuss going forward now only work in PvE. And other things only work in PvP, which is whenever you're fighting another player. When you hit their base, when you hit their Hyperion, when you hit a fleet from another player, that's all PvP, and some defenses only work in PvP. Okay? Some TLCs, they simulate player bases. The daily River Tide campaign also hits your base. Those are special cases where, despite the fact you're fighting the game and not a player, it's behaving like another player. So PvP mechanic applies, okay? Just to make that clear, Conqueror and Defender ships were tailor-made for PvP, and some bonuses only work for them or for PvP. Armor Pull, brand new mechanic. We're still trying to fully understand when this one's good, when it's bad. Right now, all we know is that it works like a shield. So when you see there, for instance, on the C1X down below, right? Any explosive projectile hitting you or nearby you with splash damage, up to 10,000 damage, it will be countered, will be neutralized, and only 35 damage will get through. Now, that 35 literally get through your armor, no matter how much resistance you have, how much splash reduction you have, it will just get through. Okay? Until that armor pool of 500,000 for C1X is depleted. So, and then that pool resets at every battle up to the percentage of health left in your ship. So if you start a battle with 100% health on your ship, you have 500,000 pool for C1X and 1.8 million armor pool for C1M. Next battle, your ships have only 50% health. Now they're only going to have 50% of the pool. If the pool gets depleted halfway through the battle, then all the other mechanics kick in. Resistance, deflection, everything we've been talking about. The only thing that takes priority, again, speed like we discussed before, and evade, those two will work anyways. If a projectile misses, it misses. But if it hits, it gets countered by the armor pool and the armor pool alone. Okay? The upside is that it doesn't add any repair time. So any damage countered by this armor panel will not result in repair. Okay? But the minimum damage that passes through will cause repair on your existing health. Alright? The thing is, this cannot be used in PvP because it's limited, as you can see on the right there, to assault, garrison, and generalist hulls. So it cannot be used on a Tide Seeker for fighting armadas. It cannot be used on any Conqueror hull. It cannot be used on any Defender hull. Okay, so it's a PvE, and not even all PvE, but PvE mechanic. So back again to the PvP-PvE divide, we have another way of defending our ships, and that's through splash damage reduction. And this one only applies in PvP, only in environments where you're fighting other players. And that's pretty much because there are two ways you can gain splash damage reduction. One is through a tactical module called Splash Dispersion System. There are 2 levels. And you can only install it in your base. So obviously that's going to help your base defense fleet. So, which is only used whenever another player hits your base. The second way you can gain splash damage reduction is through an armor called Warp Plating. There are 3 levels, and that one can only be equipped to Conqueror hulls, which is what you use when you're hitting another player's fleet, Hyperion, or base. Okay, so the mechanic is really simple. if a mortar or rocket or any weapon with splash fires at your ship from a turret or from an enemy ship, doesn't matter, and doesn't hit it directly but lands nearby, let's say 20 points away from it, but if that weapon, that projectile, has a splash of 25, your ship will take splash damage because it's inside the circle of splash. If you have war plates, or if your ship in your base guard is covered by splash dispersion, and by the way, if you have a conqueror in your defense, they will stack, okay? The splash damage you take will be cut by a percentage, 10%, 15%, if you accumulate, maybe 30%, which means your ship will last a lot longer against mortar fire from vendettas hitting your base, or oppressors hitting your base, or prides with scatterguns. So anything with splash will be mitigated by these two mechanics in game. So speed, as I mentioned before, many weapons in the game are dump fire weapons. A lot of the cannons you see, some of the newer torpedoes like Fire Twister and Mayhem, they are dump fire weapons. Some turrets like the Maxim, the Ballista, they fire at a point where your ship is when they fire. If you move fast enough, the projectile will not track your ship like a launcher would, like a missile would. They will just hit where your ship was before. And if you're moving fast enough, even their splash will just do a fraction of damage to you, or even no damage at all. Like, it's very easy to see that when you're driving Apollos, right? Or anything against a blunderbuss turret, a scattergun turret. If you move fast enough, they just miss. Okay, so anything that's area of effect or a field, it can be outrun. So, and that's a lot to do with your driving too as well. Not only the way you build your ship to be fast, but the way you drive them. Okay, resistance. This is one of the oldest mechanics we have in the game for defense. So let's say evade didn't work, speed didn't work, and you don't have charged armor on your ship. So now the first thing that kicks in is the resistance. Okay? So whatever damage that projectile carries with it will be discounted by your resistance. So if it's 1,000 damage, you have 50% resistance, it's going to come down to 500. It's 10,000 damage, you have 90% resistance, it's going to come down to 1,000. That's simple. There are many sources of resistance bonuses, right? So look at this Apollo here. It has its base statistics that include some resistance already. Then some weapons, countermeasures, some cannons, they add resistance. Then there's armor you can put here, like anti-corrosive, anti-penetrative, like all these guys will add resistance. And then there are specials, okay? And most of them can and should be retrofitted to maximize the bonus you get. Not pictured here, but there are some auras you can have in game that increase your defense. Okay. Some weapons, though, especially in PvP, when you're hitting a player's base, most turrets have resistance bypass of up to 100%, meaning they're just gonna fully or partially ignore that resistance and hit you in full. Okay. On the other hand, some ships have a defense handicap, and if you see a ship with a defense handicap of 100%, it means do not waste your time increasing resistance, because it will be 100% ignored. If a ship has 50% handicap, it means instead of having that 96% there, I would have half as much. Okay? So again, this is more in today's game a PvE mechanic. Like the Conqueror hulls all have 100% handicap. The Defender hulls today all have 100% handicap. But all the PvE hulls, Assault, Garrison, Skirmish, Siege, they all rely on resistances big time. And you gotta max it up to fit the purpose you want to use the ships for. A separate type of resistance that comes after that normal resistance, and then that normal resistance will just apply against any sort of incoming damage. But if that damage is coming from a turret, then turret resistance also applies after the normal resistance. So again, say a turret fires at you and it has a projectile, can be a missile, can be whatever, cannon, ball, it has 1,000 damage. And you had 70% normal resistance. So now minus 70%, you're left with 300. Now if your ship also has 50% turret resistance, you get that 300 minus 50% because it's coming from a turret. So now you have only 150 damage getting to your ship. Okay? That's how it works. The cool thing about turret resistance is that it applies to all types of damage as long as it's coming from an enemy turret. Okay? And the defense handicap does not neutralize turret defense. That still applies even if your ship has 100% handicap. Okay? The one thing to pay attention though, and I have that example here, turret defense does not stack. Unlike regular resistance where you can increase it by adding the right armor, the right special, the right weapon, just to keep increasing resistance, turret defense will only pick the highest number. So the Vendetta already comes with 40% turret defense. If you add siege battery to it that gives 50, you're not getting 90, you're not getting 70, you're just getting the 50, which is the highest number of the two. And you notice that because there's no plus sign, so it's not adding up. It's one or the other, highest one prevails. Okay? So deflection. Deflection is easy to understand because it's just a flat amount of damage that will be subtracted from the incoming projectile. So in my example here, imagine a missile mounted on a ship that has specials and whatnot, and in the end, after you apply all the specials and the ship buffs and everything, that missile deals 6,700 damage. But it has a salvo of 2, so that means you gotta divide that number by 2, and each missile coming at your ship will do 3,350 damage. Okay, as missiles are smart weapons and they'll track your ship, moving around, speeding around won't help you. It will follow your ship. But if your ship has high evade, maybe you're lucky and now the first projectile hits the water. So 0 damage. End of story. The second projectile hits your ship. And your ship, let's say, doesn't have any charged armor, because if it did, the M charged armor, you would take 25 damage, end of story. But because you don't, now you gotta look into resistances and whatnot. So let's say your ship has 70% penetrative resistance, so out of 3,350, now only 1,005 gets past 70% resistance. So it's a 30% left, right? In this case, turret defense won't apply because it came from a ship, not a turret. So finally, let's say your ship has assault deflection of 600. So now you just subtract. It's very simple. 1,005 minus 600, you take 405 damage. That's it. So deflection is really easy. It applies after resistances and very easy to calculate. So here's where it gets a little bit complicated, is what works where. So in PvE, remember that divide, in PvE, assault deflection and siege deflection work. Assault deflection will protect you, will be subtracted from any weapon, any fire coming from enemy ships. Siege deflection will subtract from the damage coming from any enemy turrets. That's simple. Okay, there are a whole bunch of other deflections that only work in PvP, and they are based on type. So if you see a deflection preceded by a damage type, such as explosive deflection, concussive deflection, radioactive deflection, these are only good when you're fighting other players or campaigns that simulate player bases. If you're fighting environment targets, they are all bypassed. Any deflection associated with the specific damage will be 100% ignored, bypassed when you're fighting environment targets. Okay, assault and siege deflection, they work on both PvE and PvP. And by the way, they stack. I mean, if you have a ship in a PvP situation fighting other player, and let's say it has assault deflection, but then you also added penetrative plates and you have now penetrative deflection, both will work and both will stack. Okay? So I just wanted to highlight a few examples. So where ships come with deflection, it's something that's built in the hull or it's not. There's not much you can do to gain deflections in PvE hulls. The only special is this one called Deflection Upgrade that can give you 20 assault deflection, 20 siege deflection. And the other way is through some armors. So if you take a look at some D5 level armors, such as D5X, D5C, they will give you 20 assault deflection, 20 siege deflection bonus added to whatever your ship may have. Okay, but you see, like for instance, this special is restricted to assault, skirmish, garrison, and siege hulls, which are all PvE types. There are any armor that you see that has plate in the name, so penetrative plate, radioactive plate, ballistic plate, compound plate, they will give deflection that's associated to one type of damage, and in that case, that only works when you're fighting other players. In base defense, in base attack, in fleet versus fleet, attacking someone, Hyperions again. So, for instance, if you apply penetrative plate 6 on your raid fleet or your FM fleet, that will be ignored and will not help you at all. But if you use that in a ship attacking a base or defending your base, then that works. Okay, that's the only thing you got to be really aware of. And finally, we get down to armor, the last resort. So having a lot of armor in your ship is good and bad at the same time, because more armor means, on one hand, you can take more hits and keep your ship alive. But more armor means also longer repairs, or more money if you coin repairs, right? So you gotta strike a balance. Usually you gotta choose armors based on your strategy. If you know you're gonna be, let's say, going up Scourge targets, which deal ballistic and radioactive damage, you should be looking for armors like D5R or D2R or D1C or D5C that will protect you against, give you more resistance against that type of damage. Okay, even though they give you less armor, because by giving you less armor, they give you less repair time. Some people will just put River Bulkhead on their ships, which gives a whole bunch of armor, but each armor you put will take an hour and a half to repair, in addition to the ship's base repair time. So people would end up with fleets of 5 ships that will take 25, 30 hours to repair, and that's just crazy, right? By applying a lightweight armor, you can actually get a much better result because of some bonuses, like that radioactive plate. I use that on most of my Conqueror hulls, right? And it takes only 37 minutes to repair. Okay. Now you can also be smart and look for weapons that give you armor but don't give you much repair time. And the best example is the Pandemonium Mortar. If you're building a mortar fleet and you need some extra armor, maybe that's a choice, because it gives you 1800 armor for only 18 seconds repair. Right? I mean, some other things like the Earth Shaker Cannon gives you some armor but gives you 5 minutes repair for like 500 armor. It's not a very good ratio, actually. Okay, the Coaxial Firestorm Mortar gives you gives you armor and for just like 5 minutes repair. Okay, so take a look at those. These are good options for you to buff your armor for sometimes less repair than actually using plates. Or some crews can also help improve your ship's defense. They provide temporary buffs to your fleet. Depending on the crew, some of them will offer more combat speed. Some will offer more turn speed, more evade, like Sea Serpents. Some of them will give more accuracy to your countermeasures, such as Bullseye Brigade. Some will give you more resistance, like Demolition Squad or Midnight Marauders, or Steelheads, just to mention a few. That's not an exhaustive list by any means, but just remember, by using some crews you gain defense buffs. Okay, now as far as I know, there are no crews that improve deflection, but there's something like Grease Monkeys that can reduce repair time, which is also in a way an improvement to your defense capabilities. Okay, on top of providing bonuses, resistance bonuses in battle. Some final thoughts. There are odd cases in game where the math kind of breaks. I'm not going to cover them all here, all the corner cases, because I want to keep the video more digestible, and it's already about half an hour long. Some weapons will have accuracy over 100%, but even in those cases, very high evade can still counter it. Like a weapon with 200% accuracy, if you have 80% evade, you discount 80% of 200%, you end up with only 40% of projectiles hitting your ships. Still decent, makes a difference. Again, speed is more, I mentioned speed as a defense factor, but that's only good if you're in a target where you can keep moving, right? Like speed's not going to help you if you're using hell rates to fight rivers where you need to stop and fire. You can't just keep moving or you'll be detected. And the oddest one perhaps is when you calculate damage after applying resistance, turret resistance, and deflection, and you end up with a negative number. And like, oh, what happens then? Is my fleet indestructible, invincible? And the answer is no. Simple answer. Kixeye programmers, they coded a minimum pass-through damage in game. So whenever damage gets too close to 0 or below 0, this automatic number, minimum fixed number, takes over. And they are not published anywhere, so I cannot tell you what they are because I don't know. But these are some of the odd cases, okay? In summary, use all the mechanics you can to make your fleets last longer, to make them more effective. Anything is better than just purely adding armor, as more armor means more repairs. So use all the other mechanics first. You will perform better if you can build fleets for specific purposes, so you can maximize their defenses against damage type X or damage type Y. For instance, if you do a fleet that's only good at doing FM, you know you only need to deal against explosive and penetrative damage type, so you can max out just on that, right? Instead of trying to build a ship that's kind of good against everything, but ends up being mediocre against everything. Okay, if you guys have any questions, post them in the comments. If you like the video, please click like and subscribe to my channel. Share this video with your alliance mates who need a better understanding of how the game works. And stay frosty, everyone. Talk to you next time.